Hi, I'm Ron and welcome to PopScicle, where I talk about popular culture, science, and everything in between. This is the third in my series of episodes on BL series. In my previous episode, I had talked about my top 10 BL actors in terms of their acting performance. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you haven't seen it yet, I have the link at the end of this video and also down below. This particular episode will be talking about couples. And in particular, this is my list of the top 10 wholesome BL series couples. Now, this is not my list of my favorite couples. That's a different list that I might publish here at some other time. Why do I make that distinction? There are some couples that really strike me as having really great chemistry and ultimately having a great story, especially near the end of their respective series, but I wouldn't necessarily call them wholesome. And so don't expect such couples in this top 10. I'll mention two of them. Thun type and Corn and Knock are two of the most popular BL series couples, particularly from Thai BL. And I love both couples because they have the ultimate chemistry. In fact, their actors, Mugolf and Max Tool, are the kings of BL and two of the most shippable fan servicey couples out there. But their relationship can be quite toxic sometimes, can have toxic origins, and can have toxic side plots along the way. So they weren't as wholesome as we would have wanted. And so don't expect to see those two couples here. I hope you know that. When we're talking about a wholesome couple, we're not talking necessarily about a couple that's not overtly sexual, where it's just a kiss or a high five. You know what I mean? That's not what I mean by wholesome. Not just what I mean by wholesome. A healthy relationship, a non-toxic relationship, a respectful relationship with some moral grounding. Mutual respect, I believe, is the most important thing here. Not a lot of bitterness to it. And I believe, most importantly, we can really argue that the two in the couple, in the pairing, really help each other grow into better people. And so that's what I believe is a wholesome couple. They may have fights. I'm not saying that wholesome couples cannot fight. And in fact, one of the couples in my top 10 fights quite a bit or argues quite a bit, but I found their relationship quite endearing and overall something to aspire for. That's probably one other thing to say about wholesome couples. Now, cute couples, adorable couples also have a place here, and at least one of the couples in my top 10 can definitely be said to be a very cute couple. But there should be something much more than that. It should be something inspiring, not necessarily pure, although the word pure can probably be said of the top one in my list, maybe the top two. So now let's proceed to my top 10 most wholesome BL series couples. But before that, I'd like to give an honorable mention to Kai and Third from Theory of Love. Now, in case you're wondering why they're not in the top 10, that's because the main reason why I'm putting them as an honorable mention in the first place is because of the special episode that came out just a few weeks ago. If not for that special episode, I probably wouldn't even give them an honorable mention. We all know it. I mean, we all love Kai, right, and Third as characters, but Kai was sort of a douche bag. He was a jerk to Third for most of the series. He learned his lesson later on and did show that he had true love for Third. But for much of the episode, he abused their relationship. And the relationship was pretty much one-sided. And he wasn't even a good friend, really, to Third. And so I can't, in good conscience, put them in this top 10. However, in the special episode, which was set years after the original episode, it was a pretty wholesome relationship. already, and that was shown in the Kai's respect for Third's feelings, and so um, I think that was a signature of a wholesome relationship. Now let's proceed to our actual top 10, and at number 10 we have Ki and Chen from Boys Lockdown. So this is a pretty new series. It just ended a few days ago. It's not a perfect series. Well, then again, there's no such thing as a perfect series. There are near perfect ones. This one is flawed. I hate to say this about the direction, but it's one of the things I have some issue with. I hate to say that because I love a lot of the films that the director, Jade Castro, has made as a filmmaker. But regardless of that, I believe that this is one of the better Pinoy BLs. It has so much heart in it, a lot of cuteness and passion, and the acting is generally good. The cinematography is superb, of course, because the director of photography is Tay Clamor, an award-winning cinematographer in the Philippines. Having said all of that, I think it's difficult to deny that there is chemistry between Ki and Chen, and there is something really cute and adorable about their story. You know, a lot of BLs do come from one person having a crush on the other. Others start from something deeper than a crush, but here it's like that cute crush that you experience in high school, and it's mutual almost right away. Well, for Chen it came much earlier than for Ki, but when they saw each other really for the first time, because the first time that that Chen saw Ki, it was only one-sided. But when they saw each other, there were sparks right away. And their story from the very start was an adorable thing to follow. Their near misses and their cute conversations on the phone, which eventually became a bit raunchy. uh, uh, I believe that was in the second to the last episode in particular. And then eventually culminating in that kiss, which took a lot of us by surprise, given how passionate it was and given how long it was. Um, there's no third party involved. There's no toxicity involved between them. It's all very sweet. You know, that's one word probably that we can use to describe the relationship between these two characters. It was really sweet. Of course, one has to say they did risk their health at the end of the finale, and it's good that they both expressed some regret on that. Chen much more than Ki. That is to be noted, and that's probably going to rear its ugly head in season 2 somehow. That's something I look forward to as something providing depth to the story. But it was a cute story to follow. I wish there had been more. They could have extended this by 1 or 2 episodes more, I believe. But yeah, I think it's one of the more wholesome relationships in BL series. And so I look forward to what's going to happen next in season 2. At number 9 are No and Phun in Lovesick, the series, season 2. So this is probably the oldest couple in this list, and a lot of the people who are watching it right now have most likely watched Lovesick, the series, and the second season. I chose the second season in particular because this is where they were already taking the romantic relationship to the next level. It was also very good to see how their deep friendship early on developed into something more. There were other people who were interfering with their forming relationship. Both men had their own relationships prior to them coming together, but they were quickly resolved, and there wasn't too much drama revolving around them. There wasn't a lot of toxic drama compared to, for example, Plern Pleng and Plern Pleng's character in Together With Me, and of course Long in Tharn Type. which is why you'd never see those couples in a list of wholesome couples. And there were so many touching scenes in this series, particularly when it involved No realizing how he really felt about Phun. Um, because he was the one who was more reserved and was more hesitant about accepting their true feelings for each other. And so it was a joy to see those scenes where he was beginning to break his defenses and give in to his feelings. I think some of the sweetest scenes that they have even inspired other series. For instance, when I saw that scene in Gaya sa Pelikula, where Carl and Vlad were playing with the garden hose, getting themselves wet, I instantly remembered that scene in Lovesick the series, I believe in the first season, when they were doing the same. And who got sick? I forget who. I think Phun got sick after that one. And you know, it's one of those cute high school romance stories, which we do get a lot in the BL series industry, but not a lot have done it as adorably as Lovesick the series has. Lovesick the series 2 is admittedly too long. It's probably 10 or more episodes too long. They could have shortened it, and there were a lot of characters that didn't get a very good development. And in fact, in certain episodes, the main couple took a backseat. And I think that hurt the series somewhat, especially again because of how cute their couple is and how sweet their couple is. But ultimately, the series ended on a high note for them, and it was a great thing to watch their journey from friendship to ultimately what they ended up having. And ultimately, we got to revisit this couple in reminders. They were much older at that time, and they still had that quite pure relationship, which was often affected by jealousy. But you know, they never really took that jealousy to a toxic level, the way some other couples or a lot of other couples in BL series do. At number 8 is the newest, because it's not even done. This is Adachi and Kurosawa from Cherry Magic. So Cherry Magic is one of the favorites of a lot of BL fans. It's a Japanese BL, and it's one of the cutest, most adorable things you can be watching right now. And those same two adjectives can be used for the main couple and the actors and characters themselves. They are cute and adorable. And that's really what puts them in this list. The reason why they're not higher, or two of the reasons why they're not higher on this list are, number one, again, it's not yet done. The manga is done or has been ongoing, has been going on much longer, and so there's much more resolution in that, but I don't know what has gone on in the manga, so I'm just basing it on the series. And so there's not a lot to say about where the series is going. And number two, because of that, we haven't really seen the couple together as long as we've seen the other couples in the other BL series, which I'm ranking higher in this list. Now, having said of all of that, I don't think anyone can deny that there's so much charisma to the actors, and it's so amusing to see Adachi so flustered by what's going on. You know, the magic, the touch of magic fantasy in the plot, with that magical ability of being able to read other people's thoughts with touch, is a nice touch, which adds to the charm of this series. Again, I don't know what will happen to the main couple, but from what I'm seeing so far, this is definitely one of the most wholesome couples, because it's so based on mutual affection and respect. Also, respect for each other as people. It's not only lust, it's not only sexual desire. It's respect for each other as good people. and that's probably why it comes across as such a strong relationship, even though it's just starting. So I'm really, really excited to see where this relationship is going to go. Hopefully, it just becomes more solid and it stays wholesome throughout the series. At number 7 are Mes and Thun from He's Coming to Me. Ompawat and Singto Prachaya both made it to my top 10 BL actors list because they were both excellent in their roles and are among the best actors in the Thai BL industry. In fact, we can argue that both are among the best young actors in Thailand right now. And this story of a relationship between a living human and a ghost could have gone wrong in so many ways, but with such charismatic and talented actors, it wasn't going to be the case because it was really handled very well by these two professionals. It might bother some people that when they first met, Mes was already of age, was already a young adult, whereas Thun was very young, was a very young boy, and Mes would later on admit in the final episode that he already had some feelings for Thun. But aside from that, it was a very good relationship that really developed both of them. For instance, Mes was alone, was miserable, and he couldn't move on because no one was visiting him. No one loved him enough to visit him. And so he formed this attachment with a living boy who could see him. And he grew to depend on that boy even when he became older. And then Thun found himself. He realized who he truly was because of Mes. Part of me can't believe that I'm saying this about a relationship between a ghost and a living person, and I can't even think about how they'll take their relationship into the future. But that's part of the charm to it, and both actors were amazing. You could really feel their anguish when they were about to separate and when they realized that they couldn't hold on to each other, especially after Thun had done so much to be able to help Mes move on. You can imagine the conflict in his heart there. He wanted to help Mes move on because that's what he thought, that's what he knew Mes has wanted for so many years, but at the same time, he didn't want to let Mes go. And if you can't call that a selfless, loving relationship, then I don't know what you can call it. It's sacrificial, it's selfless, it's pure, essentially. And so, yeah, it was easy to put them in this top 10, and in fact, arguments could be made for it being higher. At number 6 is one of the most popular couples right now, Sarawal and Tine, particularly for Still Together. I'm not the biggest fan of Together, the series. I know a lot of people who aren't either, and it wasn't just that high five. And I'm not saying that they're wholesome just because they had that high five instead of a kiss, which a lot of people were expecting. However, Still Together, I believe, was a much stronger installment of the series than the first run, than the original Together, the series. And they were able to improve on a lot of things, including the chemistry, the acting of the principal actors, particularly Win Metawin, who is a great actor and would have made my runners-up list in my previous episode, the top 10 BL actors, if I had given an honorable mention list. And ultimately, they were able to show what kind of a relationship they had already developed some time after the setting of the first series. And here they had a more respectful, loving, and committed relationship to each other. Still not a lot of skinship, which a lot of BL fans usually go for, but I'm glad that they didn't force that just as a reaction or just as a knee-jerk reaction to the negative reaction that high five got from a lot of fans. I mean, BL doesn't have to be sexualized all the time. Anyway, they did make up for it with a pretty good kiss in the final episode. But ultimately, what makes this a wholesome couple for me is the fact that there's so much love between them. And you can see that especially when they were forced to separate from each other for a few days. That was a contrived plot point, personally for me. But it did serve to show how much they had grown to be not necessarily dependent, but so um, immersed in each other and emotionally invested in each other that they can't imagine themselves separate from each other anymore. And that was quite endearing. That was very, very endearing. Particularly in that scene when Tine was breaking down beside the pool because Sarawal wasn't with him and he missed him so much, wanted him to be beside him. Those moments were so touching, and I couldn't help but feel, oh, so this is why this couple is so popular. I didn't get it, honestly, in Together the series, but in Still Together, they managed to pull it off and finally prove that they are a pretty good couple and a wholesome one at that. One that we can only hope to have. Something so deep and loving that you can't imagine being apart from the other even for just a few days. So that's Sarawat and Tine, particularly for Still Together, the second installment of the series. We're now in our top 5 wholesome BL series couples, and at number 5, I've put Kongpub and Arthit from SOTUS S. I could have just as easily chosen SOTUS, I suppose, given that it was the origin story and there were a lot of adorable things that happened in their journey in that series. But ultimately, I decided to go for SOTUS S, where their relationship was already more stable, more established, and they were already mature in their relationship. Of course, that didn't mean that they didn't have problems, especially near the end, after Kongpub came into the same office or workplace as Arthit, and that introduced some tensions between them. But like I said, this is not a list of couples that never fight, because that's unrealistic. There will always be fights, and the fights that Kongpub and Arthit were never really overblown, overly dramatic, toxic, physical, violent, which would have made for a non-wholesome couple. And really, the great thing here is that Arthit has always been the more reserved and more hesitant. He eventually, at the end of SOTUS, the first series, he was able to reveal to his friends the truth between him and Kongpub. But for most of SOTUS S, he was still keeping it a secret from the greater public, and he was very hesitant. And he was very, very conscious of how society would react to it. And that was part of his character. That was an essential part of Arthit's character, which makes it so rewarding that in those in that big scene in the farewell party for Kongpub and his office mate, Arthit finally felt the liberation of admitting not only to himself but to the whole world, essentially, how he really felt, who he really was, and who Kongpub really is in his life. It wasn't as if there was a major threat of him losing Kongpub to someone else, or Kongpub even leaving him, but he felt at that point that it was right. It was finally right for him to own up to his feelings for Kongpub. And that makes for a very, very loving relationship. He could have just as easily chosen to keep quiet and then just talk to Kongpub afterwards, but he felt compelled to finally tell the world how he really felt. So, hooray for more relationships like that one, right? At number 4, we have Saifa Zon from Why Are You? Saifa and Zon make up the side couple of Why Are You, whose main couple is not very wholesome by any stretch of the imagination. And so, it was easy to focus on them quite a lot, especially because, I believe, because of certain production issues they weren't able to give Sci-Fi and Zon the story that they deserved until, of course, they got their own series, with the first episode of which just aired a day or so ago, as of this recording, at least. But everyone who watched that series, I believe, fell in love with this couple. And in fact, a lot of those who watched the series liked that side couple more than the main couple and really wanted more from it. It started from bitterness and conflict, which a lot of BL series couples do. So it's not anything novel. But when they were thrown together by circumstance, they were able to lean on each other for support emotionally. And it was a beautiful thing to look at, because Saifa, for example, who was often seen as aloof and selfish and self-centered, was able to show the world and himself that he wasn't just that. He was capable of helping someone else, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. And Zon was not very sure of himself. Also, he was always a nervous wreck, and he wasn't confident about himself despite his obvious qualities. So it took Saifa to pump him up and to give him that moral support that he has always needed. And so they made a really, really good pair together. And then, finally, in that episode where they finally kiss, it's one of the best kisses in BL series ever, I believe, because it was just the perfect combination between sweet and wild, sweet and naughty. At one moment, they were crying, and I believe that was an impromptu decision from the actors, if I'm not mistaken. And you could really feel the emotion, that they were so overwhelmed by the emotions that they were feeling when they were finally kissing. And it was alternating between that very sweet crying and all of the tongue that anyone who has watched the scene would have noticed, even the first time they see it, and then of course the second, third, fourth times that they see it, they would probably zoom in or slow down the motion of those scenes, and they'd confirm, yes, there were at least 3 times when there was a fencing of tongues going on there, which shocked everyone. Probably it wasn't expected, because really, I mean, there was a kiss before that, but then this one was pretty wild, but also restrained by all of that sweetness and affection between them. And so it was a precious moment between them. And probably just for that kiss alone, but then with all of the things that I've said, the mutual support and respect that they have for each other, it's an easy choice for being in the top 5 of the list of most wholesome BL series couples. At number 3, we have A and Pete from Love by Chance. I still have not watched Love by Chance Season 2, and I don't think I have any plans of watching it. I'm not that big a fan of the tin can relationship, and there's no A and Pete. And that was really what I loved the most about Love by Chance. Aside from it being a good series overall, the relationship between A and Pete was so sweet and so, I wouldn't say pure, but it was delicate. It was very loving also, and very passionate. The thing about Ace, he's quite a complex character. He's very jealous most of the time. It's very touchy. It can be quite aggressive sometimes. There were times when I would almost cringe at and worry about where his emotions would take him. He never really took it to violence, not really. Although there was aggression in certain scenes, which can be quite intimidating. And Pete is a very gentle soul, very fragile. And so it was sometimes scary to see how the aggression coming from A would throw off Pete, maybe break him, but that never happened because Pete knew that despite those aggressive outbursts from A, A had his back the whole time. And uh, a lot of that was born out of A's frustration at Pete not taking care of himself, not loving himself enough. Um, and in fact, the most uh, the biggest outbursts of A were when Pete wasn't paying attention to his own safety and his own health, and also was denying his own happiness because of what he thought society needed to see or what society was demanding. So there was that key scene on the football field when he was essentially he was telling A that he did like A, but A is better off going with with a woman because that's what society dictates. And A fought for that. I mean, fought against that and fought for him and Pete to be together. And then even before that, from the very start, A always had Pete's interests in mind and heart, and he was the best supporter for Pete. Um, and the way Pete responded to that love and eventually opened up and became a stronger person was a wonderful thing to see. So is A perfect? Definitely not. He's a flawed character, and that's probably why he's a great character and so well carried by Perth. In fact, if I had made an honorable mention list in my previous episode, aside from Win Meta Win, I would have also placed Perth in that because he created the character of A so well and developed him so well. So yeah, some people might disagree with this being a wholesome couple, but I think it is, despite the aggression sometimes coming from A, because while there was sometimes a fear of how Pete would handle it, there was never a fear really of him hurting Pete, whether on purpose or not. And he never did physically, emotionally, not really. Um, it's just part of his character. He's just a very, very passionate individual. At number 2, we have Cairo and Gavril or Kyril from Gameboys. So Cairo and Gav meet online and they don't meet in person until episode 10, which is a magical episode. Of course, they take the relationship further through jealousy and through fights, through that epic fight scene, and then finally culminating in that most glorious of kiss scenes ever in episode 13. And it was a journey, quite a journey. There is so much love between these two characters that you can feel it through the screen, even when they were still separate from each other. So much feeling, and it's really a testament to how great these two actors are. And you would remember, if you've seen my previous video, that both of them are in my top 10 BL series actors list. But aside from that, the story that Ash Malanum wrote for them really made for a couple for the ages. A couple of the times. The pandemic has separated couples physically, maybe, and yeah, even emotionally. But here in this series, it gives us hope that despite these circumstances, there could be love. And this was a love that was supported by mutual respect and affection for each other. Misunderstandings, yes, again, this is not a list of couples that never fight. And in fact, this was probably the most epic fight or one of the most epic fights in BL series without going into violence or toxicity. It was a real fight that real couples have, a real misunderstanding done over the phone, of course, which made it even more hurtful. And then those moments that they had when they were talking on the bench and still again misunderstood each other, but you knew there was so much love between them and there was so much hurt and they just had to communicate, and they finally did, because they knew that that's what they needed to do, and they couldn't give up each other. They've gone through so much that there is no way that any one of them would be willing to just simply give up on the other. They would fight for it. And there's nothing more touching than seeing them finally getting together, getting to touch each other, and even also get to come together with their best ally, Pearl, at the end of episode 13. So, yeah, this is partly because I love Game Boy so much, and then again, they keep on popping up in my videos, so it's obvious that I love Game Boys. It's my favorite Pinoy BL series. But also, I don't think anyone can deny how magical this couple is, and um, how healthy it is for both of them. Gav was able to break Kai out of his shell, his cancer uh, shell, and Kai was able to show Gav that you are not alone, Gav. You have me. Gav has Kai. And Gav has been fearing being left alone for so long, but Kai was able to fill that gap and show Gav that he is loved. So, and the same with Kai, because Kai never felt that, never experienced that really. And so, yeah, it's one of the best couples ever. Not just the most wholesome, but one of the best couples out there. And finally, we get to our number one, and our number one most wholesome BL series couple is Dean and Pharm from Until We Meet Again. This is the ultimate couple in decency and consent. The top two, in fact, Kyril and Dean Pharm, are the consent kings. There were a lot of scenes where they purposely showed Dean asking for Pharm's permission before being sweet on him, or being flirtatious toward him, being physical toward him. And of course, Pharm would respond in his typical cute Pidin way, which is so adorable. And really, it didn't even have to have that whole element of reincarnation for them to be such a solid couple. But of course, that was a primary part of the plot. But again, even without that, they would have made for such a respectful and solidly loving couple. You just knew that Dean was there all the way for Pharm, was going to protect him from whatever. And then you just knew that Pharm trusted Dean with his love, with his heart. And he knew that Dean would never hurt him. And Dean respected Pharm's decision at the end to give themselves time off from each other, because he wanted to make sure that it wasn't just destiny playing with their emotions and dictating that they be together. He wanted to find out for sure if it was really his personal feelings. And Dean could have made a big issue out of it. I'm sure he wanted to. But he respected Pharm enough to say, sure, go ahead, take your time, I'll just be here. I won't be going. We've gone through so much together in 2 lifetimes. I'm not about to give you up, but I will give you the space that you need. And ultimately, of course, we got the ending that we wanted, and the ending that they deserved. The ending that their previous incarnations also deserved. There were so many scenes, of course, where Pharm would break down when his memories, or the memories of his previous life, would come back, and Dean was always there to help him, to soothe him, to comfort him. And when the same happened with Dean, Pharm was also there. So it was such a rich and pure relationship. I think that the word pure can be used for this one easily. And this is probably the purest of all couples in BL series. It's hard to imagine a purer one. And the consent played a big part there. Consent is not something that you see too much of in BL series, particularly in Thai. BL series, but you see it at the forefront here, and that's part of really what makes this relationship so solid. And so it's number one in my list of top 10 wholesome BL series couples. So are your favorites in my top 10? What do you think I should have added to my top 10? Please feel free to comment below, share your ideas, and then let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more episodes on BL series and other things on popular culture or science, don't forget to subscribe to PopScicle so that you may be alerted to new content. See you again next time.